So I'm out here at the tuner's house. This is where dude lives. This is the situation he's got going on here. Seems like a pretty nice guy so far. He had to run back in the house to go do something. Got engine blocks laying all over the place, race fuel. This was on the dyno before me. It's not a big turbo at all. That don't happen to me. Going on the dyno. Here we go. About to get started. Change out the injectors and start tuning. So idle has been adjusted and modified for the 80-pound injectors. Now it's getting rolled up onto the dyno and getting ready to strap down. It's about to get real. Getting the wideband hooked up and getting it ready to go. Just starting up the dyno. Car throttle tuning right now. Officially a power run, but he's about to do one with the load off just to see kind of where he's at on medium boost. So 446 power and 504 foot-pounds of torque on low boost, and it's not even finished yet. And then it happened. So on the dyno, made the power run that you guys just saw, and I turned the video off and went over to the tuner to see what was going on and what he was thinking and just kind of, you know, what do we do next and that kind of stuff. And he said, well, you're losing fuel pressure. And I thought, what? There's no way. I was doing tuning on the street and I never lost fuel pressure. He said, well, here it goes. So I stood right there next to the dyno, next to the Corvette, and he did a power pull, not really a power pull, but he did the same pull again, and we watched my fuel gauge right there, and sure enough, it was losing fuel pressure. It gets to about 4,800, 4,900 RPM. It was steady as a rock, and then boop, it drops fuel pressure, and he had to back out of it. It starts to go lean. And I thought, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Maybe something broke. So I got my data logs out and we compared with his data logs. And what was going on was I had never gone to the point he was going. I would go to the point where I would build boost and make sure the boost would stabilize so my wastegates were working, and then I would back off. Turns out I never got above about 4,500 RPM. So I looked and mine was the same as his until his gets to about 5,000, and then the AFRs go lean. So that's what happened on the dyno. And as frustrating as it is, that's what happens when you're building these custom cars. So we did some troubleshooting right there on the dyno. Basically what we did is I have, you know, the fuel pressure regulator up here by the fuel rails. And so what we did is pinched off the return line underneath there, pinched it off so that it couldn't bleed the fuel pressure regulator, couldn't bleed any pressure. He got in the car and manually turned the fuel pump on, and it took probably 10 seconds before the fuel pressure came up from 0, and then it spiked to 100. And he said, yeah, I've seen that 100 times before. That means something inside the tank is hemorrhaging fuel pressure. And I thought, oh my gosh. So it turns out the fuel pump that was in there was good enough to overrun whatever leak I had going on in the tank until it got to really make some demand, because I've got the 80-pound injectors in there now. So the 60-pound injectors are gone, 80 pounds are in there, and they demand a lot more fuel pressure, fuel flow. So it took me a couple of days to figure out exactly what I wanted to do, how much money I was willing to spend, what I was going to do about it. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it once and do it right. So I'm converting it over to flex fuel. It's going E85. The original plan was 600 wheel horse, 60-pound injectors, 300 liter per hour fuel pump on high octane pump gas. And I would have been able to get there if there wasn't something going on in the tank. I am about 90% sure that the crossover tube where it goes from the driver's side to the passenger side to get fuel from one tank to the other, I'm pretty sure that's damaged and broken somehow, or it's leaking enough to where that's where my extra fuel pressure is going. And if I have to drop both tanks to get in there and fix something, I'm just going all out with it. So I'm going to flex fuel. I'm going to put a flex fuel setup on it. That way I can run straight E85. E85 is abundant where I live, and it's $1 a gallon cheaper than premium. I know you use more, but it's still cheaper in the long run. I did the calculation. I got the spreadsheet out. So I wanted to wait, so I decided what I wanted to do, ordered the parts, and the parts just came in today. So first things first, crossover tube. I'm ditching the stupid General Motors system that they have in there, and this is what I'm doing in its place. I went and found me a micro pump. So basically what this is going to do is just, I'm going to put this inside the passenger tank, and it's going to transfer fuel from the passenger side to the driver's side through the crossover tube, and it's just going to be in there and do that. I've tested it, and this pump uses about 80 milliamps running dry. I bought 2 of them, and I took one apart last night. These got here last night. The rest of the parts got here today. And it's a sealed system with bearings, so it can run dry the entire time. And it uses next to no amperage, and it's a 12-volt DC pump. So that's going in the passenger side tank. This is a box of goodies from Racetronics again, and it's getting corrugated fuel hose connected to it like so, and that is going to run from the passenger tank through the crossover tube into the driver's tank, so that will always be running, always be transferring fuel, and I will never have to worry about that stupid setup again causing me fuel pressure issues or going bad or something like that. Next thing is flex fuel sensor. That's getting hooked up, and I found out that the E38 ECM on my car has a blank pin and already ready for flex fuel, so that's getting put in. Then I have decided to get 2 Walbro 450 E85 pumps. 450 liters per hour. It probably won't flow quite that much at 68 psi or 70 psi, but I've got 2 of them bad boys, and that should be enough to do 1,400 horsepower even on E85. So I should never run out of fuel flow again. So I've got 2 of those bad boys going in the tank. I bought the General Motors connectors that go with them. So these are the connectors for the fuel pumps. This one right here, this red one, is the connector for the flex fuel system. So this connects to the flex fuel sensor, and then I've got to run wires from the sensor for power, ground, and signal. And it comes with 3 of those connector pins so that I can supply the wires into there. I bought me some crimp pliers so that I can crimp the weather packs. And then I thought, okay, how do I hang 2 pumps in the factory sending unit? If you go back to some of my old videos, you'll see that whenever I took the factory sending unit apart to modify it, the pump that I do have in there barely fit. It did fit, and it fit nicely. I was able to put everything back together. But the thing about factory fuel systems is they've got that basket in there, and that acts like a surge tank, so that whenever you step on the gas, the fuel doesn't rush away from the fuel pump on, a quarter tank or something like that. Or when you go around the corner, the fuel doesn't slide away from the pickup of the fuel pump. So what they do is they create those miniature surge tanks in there so that the pump is constantly submerged, even in corners and acceleration and braking and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that whole thing. I don't know exactly how I'm going to modify it yet. I'm actually going to get into that tomorrow morning. Start working on that, but I'm probably going to end up cutting off the bottom basket and just hanging the 2 pumps in there. But then you don't have a surge tank. Then what do you do about that? So what I decided to do, and that's what this giant box is from Summit Racing. I decided to go with instead of a fancy surge tank and all that kind of stuff, I decided to go with this bad boy. Lovely packaging, right? I'm going with the Holley Hydromat. So if you don't know what that is, Google it. Basically what it is you can put the tiny little corner of this Hydromat in fuel and it will still supply full fuel pressure. You can suck a tank completely dry with these things. So this is actually designed for a Walbro 450. And it's got multiple locations so that you can sit it down inside the tank and turn it any way that you need to. And so I actually got 2 of those, 1 for each pump. So the plan is I'm just going to hang the 2 pumps in there, strap them down somehow, put those Hydromats on it, dunk it all back in the tank, and I'm going to run both of those through the factory fuel line, and I've already got the return line plumbed in. Put the pump, that little mini pump, into the passenger tank and be done with it. Because by far the biggest headache of dropping those tanks is that stupid crossover tube. And anybody who has worked on these things knows that is the pain point. The tube itself is easy to pop loose, but then the mini tubes that go through it, the 2 tubes that go through the tank that transfer the fuel, those are the biggest pain in the butt. They're a pain in the butt to hook up to the fuel sending unit. They're a pain in the butt to connect to the crossover tube. They're just a pain all the way around. So just having that 1 tube flowing all of the fuel from one side to the other, and that's why I got the corrugated hose, so I can just yank it out of there whenever I need to drop the tank, if I ever have to drop the tank again. Pop the crossover tube, yank that out of there, the tank comes down. It's not bad to drop these tanks if you can deal with the crossover tube relatively quickly. And now that I've got that hydraulic jack stand and I've got a lift, it'll be super easy. So that's what happened on Dyno Day. 445 horsepower, 504 pounds of torque, I think, at 4,800 RPM at, I think it was 4.5 or 5 PSI. And the tuner was telling me if I get proper fuel flow and we go to E85, we can run 12 PSI of boost. He's done it all day long. And we can probably get somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 wheel horsepower and 700 foot-pounds of torque. So that's what we're doing next. So stay tuned. I'll post some information about the fuel system upgrade, and I'll definitely post videos when I get back to the dyno here in, I guess, a couple weeks. I'm not exactly sure. So that's where I'm at. That's what happened. Here we go.